A very warm welcome to this edition of the IoT Security Foundation webinar series. Before we get going, I want to talk about our next in-person event, which is less than 2 weeks away. It's called You Are Not Ready for the CRA. And as the name may suggest, it's an entire day dedicated to the EU Cyber Resilience Act and the preparedness, or lack thereof, for this upcoming European legislation for companies the world over. You're Not Ready for the CRA will take place on Wednesday, the 15th of July in London at the premises of PA Consulting, which is a 4-minute walk from Victoria Tube Station. If your organization is an IoTSF member or you're an individual professional IoTSF member, entry is completely free. If you're not an IoTSF member, shame on you. Then it's just £30, which includes lunch, coffees, biscuits, etc. You can even get a day's worth of, well, can you even get a day's worth of food or drink in central London for less than £30? I reckon it's a bargain. For details of the agenda and to register, go to the events section of iotsecurityfoundation.org, or if you're watching this broadcast live, the link is in Zoom chat, or it will be in a couple of moments. So, every year, the IoT Security Foundation collaborates with Copper Horse Limited to produce a joint report entitled The State of Vulnerability Disclosure in Global Consumer IoT. Earlier in 2026, we published the 8th edition, and there's been a podcast about it recently. There's been a blog, there's been a fireside chat video, and now a webinar with two of the report authors from Copper Horse. For all of the content that I've just mentioned, as well as the report itself, I'll be putting a link in Zoom chat, and it's in the description if you're watching on YouTube. So a bit later on, we'll hear from Copper Horse CEO David Rogers, MBE. But first up is the technical lead at Copper Horse. He is Mark Neve. If you have any questions or comments or observations about what you're about to hear, please put them in Zoom chat if you're watching this live. Cross over to Sandhurst in England now. Mark Neve, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to anybody in the evening or morning to anybody else who's anywhere else. So let me share my slides and just make sure we can see them. So I'm hoping you can see the background slide.
Yes, you're good to go, Mark.
Excellent. Oh, great. So as I guess probably the best thing to do is give a sort of introduction to what the report is, where we were when we started with this, and kind of how how we pull together this information to create the report. So, Chris said earlier, we started this off in 2018, so it's the 8th year of the report now. So back then in 2018, so many of the devices were, they had things like default passwords. So your username and password was admin. These devices were never getting software updates. Most of these companies providing these very basic IoT devices, they knew nothing about sort of vulnerability disclosure. So there was almost no way to contact these companies, and if you did, they probably weren't going to do much about it. So because of these issues, botnets were rife. There's lots of these webcams, routers, DVRs, just all this sort of home technology, where these companies have been rushing out to be first to market. You get your product first to market, you get to sell, more of your product than any of your competitors do. So the idea was just run as fast as you can, sell as much as you can. And I don't think people were too concerned about security. So at that time, there was no laws in place. I think in 2018, so we surveyed, it was over 300 manufacturers we looked into. I think there was 9.7% of them actually had a vulnerability disclosure policy. So when we went into this and actually started digging into and looking at what information we could get, the problem you have with these devices is how do you test a device or like a company's position? If you have to buy the device, you have to sort of potentially disassemble it, look at what's in there. So we were trying to work out how can we find out the company's posture. So what we decided to do was we do a web search. We look on the website and we see if we could find any information. So did they have a policy? What were they suggesting was in scope? Did they have like a security page, security.txt? What was their sort of, what was the company's position on security? Because if they have none of this, then often it's not something that they're sort of thinking about. It's the first thing that they're in their mind. Um, so I think if I roll on the slide. So roll back from 2018 to now. So last year's report, the 2025 report, it's quite a jump from 9.7%. We're making progress, but the progress is very slow. So that is around about a 30% jump over 8 years. Now we have extended the amount of manufacturers that are in the report. So we started at 300, we're up to almost 500 now. So, the numbers have grown, and they've grown quite well, but it's still, when you look at the sort of headline figure here, you're saying almost 6 in 10 companies still have no way for a researcher to contact them if there's an issue. So there's still fundamentally a problem there. We'll come into it a little bit later, but retailers, this is somewhere where sort of retailers have been helping improve the quality, like the amount of companies with good quality vulnerability disclosure and a good posture on security. So here's just showing over the years how it has improved. So I think it's where we at. So we had each year we've sort of grown a little bit. I think the biggest jump we had in all of this was between 23 and 24, when the PSTI Act was looking like it was going to be implemented. But it's still been a very slow. It's usually between about sort of 3 and 5%. The jump between 24 and 25, when the PSTI Act was already in place, was only like 5%. So it's not been adoption's been very slow. As a part of looking at the adoption, as we got more and more data, we could see this, or we could plot a graph which told us how long it would take to get 100% adoption. So if you have every company who's ever selling a device has a policy according to this, our projections, and they'd be reasonably stable for a long time, it's 2040. So was it there was another 15 years before we'd actually get full adoption, which is just it's just mad. I think David will discuss it a little bit later, but we're hoping that the CRA potentially will give us a big spike of improved data. But I guess that's yet to be seen. One thing we were hoping for, because of the PSTI, the UK PSTI Act, it mandates that companies have a vulnerability disclosure policy in order to sell products in the UK. We were hoping that we would see a better jump. It was quite a small jump considering like it's actually law now in the UK. So next one. So what we also have as a part of the report is we have this threshold test, and this is just a way of making it really easy, giving companies a way to like get sort of a green status. So say what we do with this is we do red, amber, green. So if you don't pass part 1 and part 2 of the threshold test, you get red. If you actually have a disclosure policy, you get amber. And if you offer a timeline, so you'll say, we'll after you tell us we have a vulnerability, we'll acknowledge that within 3 days, and we'll try and fix it within 60 to 90 days. As long as you have a timeline that shows that you're communicating with security researchers, then you get green status. And it's been quite good because we have had engagement with manufacturers about this. And we thought it's simple to implement. You've got 2 things. It's just if you can tick these 2 boxes, then you're compliant with it. With our sort of threshold test, and you can see sort of from our numbers since we introduced this in 2021, you had quite a few meeting initially, like the first part of the threshold test, but not many on the second part. and it sort of switched over later on. So it's reasonably good. You look at the numbers there for our threshold test, and that's only 1/4 of all the manufacturers. Sort of nearly 500 manufacturers, 1/4 of them actually meet this really quite simple test. So actually, just to praise some of the companies. So here's a list of all the companies actually who do pass both parts of the threshold test. In total, it's 136 manufacturers out of 491. One of the things that the real positives that have come out of this threshold test is that we've had companies coming to us and saying, "Oh, but we're doing the right thing here. We've implemented everything we need to, so we should be green. We shouldn't be amber because people want, they want this green status, which we really like." However, some of them, one company we dealt with this year after the report, they came to us and said, "Oh, we believe we should be green," and when we investigated how the disclosure policy was there was a link to you had to click, I think, through it was about 4 or 5 pages. You had to select a drop down to actually, from the point of them saying, if you'd like to report a vulnerability, to the point of being able to report it, you say you had to go through, like, I think it was five clicks or 5 pages. And it's just, so we said this to them. We said, it needs to be clear. It needs to be you click on the link, you should get to it. You shouldn't have to go through multiple pages. And they said, that's great feedback. We're really pleased. We're really happy with that. We've fixed our site, and we're looking forward to having passing the threshold test next time around. So we've had really good engagement with companies who want to do the right thing, and sometimes they just need a little bit of guidance from us. So just sort of diving into the regional bit. So as a part of the report, what we do is we look at the major retailers across different regions. And this was quite interesting, especially in the 2024 data. So a lot of these retailers are actually really, really good. They do stock a lot of products that are from, I guess, more well-established manufacturers. So we did find in the 2024 data, like Walmart were selling a lot of these kind of David refers to them as the sort of long tail. There's sort of devices manufactured in China, like mass manufactured. They just want to really sell product. They don't really care about security. So there was lots of things that it was difficult to get hold of the companies. Some devices we found there wasn't even in the user manual, there was no address or name of the company who actually sold this product. However, looking at this from a positive manner, in 2025, there was significant improvement. Walmart had done much better. The UK, almost all the manufacturers were everybody was above, sort of, apart from Amazon, who again sell a lot of these sort of white good devices, like the sort of cheaper end devices, because they sell an enormous amount of products. But we did pick up just the sort of just the more popular products. So we try to stay away. There's so many products on Amazon, it's very difficult to sort of capture all of that. So we just try and pick the most popular products. But yeah, for 2025, significant improvement actually in the retailers. And we think, as I said earlier, the retailers have got a real opportunity to sort of help to make sure that companies manufacturers are selling products that have disclosure policies and they take security very seriously. Interesting one here, just in that this is the HQ for the manufacturers. So nobody in the top IoT products are selling out of Africa, but there's a real close balance between manufacturers who are based in Europe, or the HQs based in Europe and North America, and it's slightly less in Asia, significantly smaller in South America and Oceania. But obviously, this is where the manufacturers, where the HQ is. It's not necessarily where they're manufacturing the product, which is a completely different thing, but more difficult to sort of dig into that information. It's really about where the manufacturer's HQ is that we're looking at here. Give it time. Okay. So yeah, product categories. I think for the most part, things are actually doing everything's moving in a very sort of positive manner. Um, we've got there, so we've got like the arrows there that say whether we're doing better, whether these categories are doing better or worse than they did in the previous report. And what's really nice to see there is almost every category is better. I think two of them are exactly the same, and three have sort of dropped off a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, things are improving, across the board, a little bit slowly, but the fact that they are improving is we've got to focus on positives here, really. So I'll just talk about first of all, like what's useful about like proxy disclosure organizations. So companies like HackerOne, BugCrowd, probably the biggest ones, what they'll do is they'll offer you a platform where um, security researchers can communicate with you. So you can offer like bug bounties, or you can lay out exactly where you want people to look at vulnerabilities, like on your platform, and you can bug crowd or HackerOne can be like intermediary. So the vulnerabilities reported to them, and they through proxy disclosure they'll communicate with you. And maybe if you're not an expert on what you're doing with vulnerability disclosure, you can have these companies do it for you. It's a good way of working. So if you're not experts and you need somebody to help you out with it, um, uh, there's a few of these companies using these. It's not what's the numbers? It's like 8% actually using proxy disclosure. And the numbers are reasonably static there. I think they're slightly up on the previous report, but again, these numbers they don't tend to move very much. I guess a lot of companies, when they start taking security more seriously, they sort of employ somebody, and hopefully they have a security team in-house who can do it for them. So so again, I'll just explain what security, false security, and security.txt are. This is the idea that on your domain, so whatever your domain is, you'd just be able to do /security, and anybody who's looking to report a vulnerability, your vulnerability disclosure would be on that page. So it would make it so easy for somebody, /security, and then up it comes vulnerability disclosure. You've got your town, you've got all the information, contact point for somebody to speak to. It's not always that simple though, because some very large companies they want to have like the product security incident response team, so they have the PCERT, so they may have a completely dedicated website for that. Now we've seen some companies who they do a redirect, so it takes you to the PCERT site. Other ones it just gives you a 404. It's like a page not found. So there's lots of different sort of implementations of this. It's quite difficult to sort of get it as standard, but having a file security just makes it so easy. And security.txt is you create a file, you put it at a certain location on your website, and somebody can just use it, like just wget, you just pull that file down, and that file contains everything you need. So a link to where your policy is, an email address where you can contact somebody, a PGP key if you're offering one, so you can encrypt the communication. Just everything you need all in one place. Just makes it super easy for somebody to communicate with you. And I think this is there's a slight improvement on what we had since the 2024 data, but it's I think what we had 8% for security.txt and just over 6% for security. Just one of the things, actually, sort of an issue we've had previously with security.txt files is so as part of there's a sort of an RFC, there's a standard on this, and they say put an expiry date on it, add all this information, but then you tend to get somebody who will create the security TXT, maybe they leave the company, or maybe it's no longer their job and they get forgot about. So if you put an expiry date in your security.txt, then you need to maintain that. And we found ones that are out of date, like the email address is broken, or the company's been bought and they're no longer using, that domain, they're using something else. So, it needs to be kept updated. And so we found just people like, not quite keeping these under control, which is again another easy thing to do. And just, I think, a couple of things to say in closing. I'm pretty much done, and we're round about on time as well. So we're progressing. Things are getting better, but it's 6 out of 10 manufacturers still not having a policy. Is just after 8 years, it's frustrating. But we hope so. Really, we hope that the next report, which we've just started now, and again, David will talk a little bit more about this. Hopefully, we see a significant jump. We will see, because we were hoping that for the PSTI Act, but that didn't happen. Just a couple more things to mention before I drop off. So all these reports are on the IoTSF's website, the 8 years of them. They're also on the Copper Horse website. And as part of this, we also release open data for all of this. So you can get all of our data that we captured over the 8 years, look at it, play with it. We've had people contact us and want to, asking us questions. And we had a university student, I think, for their dissertation, they were using our data. So we're very happy. We love to share it. We love for people to use it. So yeah, please go grab it if you're interested. And that is it for me.
Thank you very much, Mark Neve, joining us from Sandhurst. In fact, the report is in Zoom chat right now, as is a podcast all about the Vulnerability Disclosure Report, a fireside chat video, and a blog as well. So plenty to get your teeth into if you so fancy. We'll have the Q&A section for this webinar coming up soon. So if you have anything on your mind about what you've been watching, please stick it in Zoom chat if you're watching live today. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us more than you know. TechWorks is the parent organisation of the IoT Security Foundation, and this year it's their 30th anniversary. To celebrate, TechWorks is having the Semiconductors to Systems Summit on Wednesday, the 26th of August, and the IoTSF Annual Conference, will take place as a part of this summit event. The keynote for the IoTSF conference this year, he's making a return after he made such a good impression last year. He is Dex Hunter Torek, formerly of the UN, Google, SpaceX, and Facebook. And I've just about finalised the agenda as well, so look out for that in the coming days. Honestly, try to make it fit. It's like a game of Tetris. My extreme gratitude, by the way, to Greenhill Software for sponsoring this year's IoTSF conference. My thanks also to NXP, Siemens, Safe Shark, Queen's University Belfast, and IC Resources. Sponsorship and exhibitor opportunities are still available, and you can register for this event at the Novotel London West now. The link is in Zoom chat, or it will be in a couple of moments, or in the YouTube description. So we cross over to Wales now, more specifically Monmouth, as we continue with David Rogers, MBE. Questions in Zoom chat, please. David, the floor is yours.